Good day, radio listeners. Welcome to this edition of the Pure Sex Radio broadcast. We're glad to have you here with us. My name is Jonathan, and we have a special guest, actually an in-house guest on the program today. So it's our Director of Wives Care, Gigi Hopkins. How are you, Gigi?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Good. And I always feel like whenever you're on the radio program that I have to allow you to give your welcome in Portuguese since you are a native Brazilian. So if you'd like to welcome all your Brazilian friends, feel free to do that.
Sem dúvida. Bom dia, boa tarde ou boa noite, gente.
Awesome. Well, one of these days, I'm sure Gigi is going to get me down to Brazil. You've been saying that since the day you came on board here. But
yes.
Before we dive in to our topic on this episode about dealing with this issue of wives care and groups that are available for wives, I wanted to give an update because, so many of you who are faithful listeners to us, you know that when we went into our year end last year, that we had a need of $47,000 in order to be able to finish 2016 strong and enter 2017 in a good position to be able to reach even more people. And so I want to give an update on that we have great news that we not only met that need, but it was exceeded. And so we are praising God that He has supplied all of our needs. And we want to thank you as our listeners, those of you who came alongside and gave toward that need, and especially for those of you who are faithful givers to this ministry. We can't do this ministry without your help since we are a listener-supported broadcast. So thank you, and if you'd like to learn about the different ways that you can partner with us, simply go to puresexradio.com and click on the donate link. So Gigi, I'm excited about what you have to share with our listeners. I think this episode is going to be especially helpful for wives out there because that's really what you're going to be dealing with. But guys, if you're listening, don't turn off the radio. Don't shut down the podcast. I think you're going to learn some things about what can help your wife if she is struggling during a season of learning about some things that you have been doing and how to really heal from that betrayal. So I want to pass it over to you because I want you first to just give us a little bit of background on what you do with wives in wives care anyway, in terms of like what is wives care ministry, so we can kind of lay a foundation for what is the need for helping wives in our ministry. And then we might start getting into some more of the specifics about these groups.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that we started out by just having me be available for wives. I remember when I first started here about 4+ years ago, there was just a need for someone who is willing to talk with very hurting wives.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I was like, my goodness, I feel like this is exactly what God would have me do. Mm-hmm. So we want to be here for those that call in for help or write emails, and just respond and help them to their next step in their healing, and to give continuity.
Yeah, because I think, and one of the reasons that we even expanded the Wives Care Ministry to really be a kind of an official ministry of our outreach is, we started realizing there was a huge imbalance between all the help and resources that was being developed and created and available for men who are finally coming to a place where they're confessing, hey, yes, I have a problem with pornography, or I'm totally sexually addicted, or whatever it is. And unfortunately, so many wives felt sort of left behind. In fact, I've heard wives tell me before that they felt double betrayed. Like they felt not only the betrayal of discovering what their husband has done in terms of his sexual brokenness, but then when they turned to the church or turned anywhere else to look for help, they feel betrayed again because there's no help available, or at least not to the same degree that there is for men. So wives care is very important because there are many wives that need help. It's not just about the addict or the man getting well and thinking that will automatically cause healing in a wife, right?
No. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what we have established here going into this year as a resource that can be helpful for wives, kind of in a group format, and really the foundation of that. So why don't you talk a little bit about this healing journey that a wife needs to go on, and then maybe we'll get into a little bit about how groups can benefit that. So what is it that wives need most, and kind of what is this healing journey about for a wife who has discovered her husband's betrayal?
It really involves this journey, and I can speak for myself. It did. There is immediate need for some emotional support, and to be able to have a safe place that you can come to and speak your heart and cry your tears, So that is going to be a big part of the healing journey. And that can come in many different ways with professional help. But really beyond that, we really need to develop relationships that we can count on along the way. And I had that, and I just think that this was fundamental to my ability to heal.
Yeah. What have you seen that the group dynamic creates for a woman versus just, let's say, one-on-one, or even just trying to, many wives are out there just trying to read a book and try to kind of do this on their own. So what does the group dynamic bring to a woman that is so beneficial for her healing journey?
The group, and I didn't experience that except a little later in my journey, but it was so encouraging to know that I'm not alone, and that there are many others who are in this journey too. And you learn a lot from others too, because there are different, personalities in different maturity levels, spiritually and emotionally, that can really give hope to each other. That interaction is precious. So there's just tremendous benefit in being able to interact with other women.
Yeah, now let's talk a little bit about the groups that you have structured here, because they're not the same as other groups, and there's all different kinds of ways to form groups. And I think sometimes when our listeners, they might hear us talk about groups, they might be thinking, oh, this is this like Celebrate Recovery? Is this like something that's sort of an ongoing never-ending group kind of a thing, and that's one form of group, that's one form of a support. And also you could think of it, there's support groups, and then there's more of kind of like growth groups, and then there's groups that are ongoing, there's groups that are open, there's groups that are closed, there's groups that are for a certain period of time. So why don't you share with our listeners what the structure of these groups are for the wives?
Okay. Yeah, and this is what God has put in our hearts this past year, to really give wives an opportunity to step out into this kind of supportive relationship environment, and get some basic information and tools to help them in their healing journey, and so this is what we came up with, the Wives Care groups, and they're only 6 weeks long, 1 hour meeting. And I do go over a little bit for those that can stay on the call, and answer some questions and things that they're dealing with. But we wanted to make it easy, because this is hard. Jonathan, to just go and talk about what's going on. For some of us, it's very shameful, and it's a hard reality to face, So for some, I know just by working with wives now for a few years, I can tell that it's really hard for them to even pick up the phone and call a support group. Do you have a group for wives of sex addicts.
Right, exactly, yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh. So we just want to make it, we wanted to facilitate that process and have women experience the benefit of this, interaction and support. So it is short term, but we do have, it's a small group, no more than 5 women that we work with for 6 weeks. And
I would say, I want to say this because listeners, Gigi wouldn't say this herself, so I have to say it. This is not a group that is facilitated just by somebody off the street. Gigi has not only years of personal experience on this journey, so she brings that. So there's already an identification that you can have with Gigi in terms of feeling like, oh, this is somebody who's traveled this road. But even beyond just the personal experience, Gigi has professional experience. She's been in this ministry for 4 years. She's gotten trained as a life coach. She has lots of professional experience in dealing with this. So there is a value to this kind of a group that is probably quite different than other groups that wives could be involved in. Not to discount other forms of groups, but this is a very specific kind of group, and we're gonna talk in just a few minutes about what is actually going to be outlined in the group, because it's not just a, hey, let's pick up the phone, let's get 5 ladies together on a group conference call and group video conference and just chit chat. So it's way more, if I could put it this way, packed with helpful tools and information rather than, and don't get me wrong, it is supportive, but if I could put it this way, it's also directional, right? You're trying to help women move forward. So talk a little bit about that in terms of how this group in just 6 weeks is maybe a little bit different from kind of your open-ended ongoing support group environment.
Yes, it is. We have some specific basic areas that we address. I send a weekly email with a resource or two that ladies are to. It could be a video or an article or an audio resource. And we touch on topics such as, dealing with our feelings, up and down feelings, and with grieving losses, and dealing with boundaries, and what's forgiveness about? Is this an instantaneous thing, or is it a process, right? One that has been very important to me is the idea that I need to practice some healthy detachment from my husband's journey, so that I can focus on mine, because it's really impossible to do both. So, in learning how to take care of yourself, that's towards the end of our time, that we focus on that, because my heart is really to help ladies to keep that up, to keep focusing on taking good care of themselves and tending to their needs as God would lead them. So
everything you just mentioned there might be put under this heading of kind of basic education, right?
Correct.
And here's something that I've seen happen over the years, not only with men that we serve, but also with the wives, is that there is sometimes a relief when you can just simply define the issues. And that's kind of what that basic education is saying, we don't want to make any assumptions that somebody coming into this journey, that a wife who's been hit with a Mack truck of her husband's secrecy and deception and betrayal is going to have knowledge of all these definitions of what she's facing, just kind of a basic education of what recovery and healing looks like. And so this is done in a gracious, respectful way. So it's not, I don't want any wife out there to think that they're going to be condescended to, or that this is going to be talking down. No, it's saying we're inviting you into a very safe space where we want to share with you some things that might start to give you some guardrails, might start to give you some handles to what's going on.
Yes. And that is, and you're right, Jonathan. And, there's no way in 6 weeks that you can own all of this, but yet you've been given, some guidelines and some guardrails that will help you along the way as you continue going on, and that's good. It's kind of an aim in different directions of healing, that it's going to be a part of your life. Yeah.
Now, there's a couple other areas that we're going to talk about, but you said, talking about aim, let's just talk about that for just a second. Mm-hmm. If a wife was to say, what's sort of your hope at the end of this 6 weeks for the women who have come through this group? What would you say to that wife is where you would like to see a wife get to? Now, I know that every wife is different, but in terms of like a general saying, hey, where we would like to see you at the end of this 6 weeks is what? What would you like to have seen happen or change? Or where would you like to see her heart and her mind after this 6 week group?
I'd love to see in short would be just for her to feel much more confident that this is, it's a hard journey, but it is doable. Mm-hmm. And not only that God has good things, on the other end, because I think being in contact with others who have been on this for a while, in my case, it's been more than 10 years, I've grown to appreciate what God has done through all of this. Mm-hmm. So if she can leave there confident that, this is tough, but it's not impossible, because with God, all things are possible, and He redeems, pain, and He redeems our stories. So if she can leave with that in mind, and then we do offer at the end, I offer a 30-minute individual coaching session. I'd like to help individually that lady, this person, to know what is the next explore, what is available to me for me to continue pursuing this journey, to wellness and healing. So.
Yeah. And, when you say, more confidence and just that good things are ahead, I think the thing that comes to my mind is that's incredibly valuable. And so many times we're looking, I know that the men many times on this, they're looking for such tangible markers. Mm-hmm. I think the wives do that too. Mm-hmm. I need to see this, and I need to see that, and I need to get here, and I need to do this, and all of that's fine. But when you kind of boil it down, the foundation of all of that movement is really a sense of hope, isn't it?
It is.
And so can you really that's kind of an intangible. Mm-hmm. And yet it might be the most valuable piece of the entire journey, is just saying, do I have a hope that what is ahead is better than what's behind, that God has good things even in the midst of chaos and pain? Mm-hmm. You can't really place a value on hope. And yet it's so incredibly important.
And it comes in different ways, surprising ways sometimes. I had a group last year that one of the ladies was a little more expressive of her anger. And that encouraged another one who saw some of us kind of not as we were in different stages, but she said, I'm glad you feel that way because I do too. So that makes me feel like I'm not so out of line,
Yeah, like it makes me feel like there's not something wrong with me. Like that's a natural, normal emotion.
Yes.
So wives out there, there's really three sort of key areas or key aspects to these groups that Gigi's going to be covered. We covered one of them. That's kind of the basic education piece. So over these 6 weeks, you're going to be getting lots of information and education and help to just, again, put those guidelines and guardrails in your life. She also mentioned the at the end, just kind of helping take some next steps with a 30-minute coaching session one-on-one. And then we've got another piece that we have here, Gigi, but you wanted to share something else before that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say on this basic education, one thing that I'm planning on doing this year that's a little different is just there are some real tips and survival techniques that I've learned along the way, in this journey. And I wanted to, in each of these 6 sessions, to spend a little time and just share, 3 or so with the ladies that I think it will be also helpful, more practical, more like this has worked for me, and you can see how that would apply or not to your situation. But that's one thing that I've gained from other women too, and I'd like to do that.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that I think is incredibly valuable. One of the things that one of our core values here at our ministry is story. Mm-hmm. And so to not only be able to invite other people to share their story, but for us also to share our story. And so many times, some of the greatest insights we get along the way is by hearing somebody else's story and what they've learned and the kind of their best practices and how they overcame certain challenges and how they worked through certain things. And so it's not always, there's a lot of good books out there, but sometimes the best book you read is another person's story. Uh-huh. And so that's helpful too. So this last piece, though, is this issue of connection. Mm-hmm. So you have basic education. You've got at the end of the 6 weeks, the coaching session, but then talk about connection and why that's so important to this group dynamic.
Well, like we started on that in the beginning, right? That developing this emotional support and understanding that you're not alone and that you're connecting with others. Yeah, connection is key to healing. Just being able to be in contact with others who are in this journey too, and not feel like you're the only one, or, you hear different aspects of everyone's journey. And it really, I think it takes out that cloud of shame. At least it eases it,
And don't you think also one of the things that just being able to connect with other women does is I think there's a natural response that a wife has when she discovers and learns of her husband's sexual brokenness, that she goes into total, like, let's get everything right. And so it's all about his recovery and all about all these kinds of things. She pours all her energy into stuff that can often distract her from even her own needs, her own health, her own care.
Yes.
And even her own growth. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say that in a way that causes a woman to reach through the radio and punch me in the face. But one of the things that so many women discover along this is when they start diving into the journey of healing, she discovers, I have areas of growth need too.
Right.
They're different from my husband, but I have things that God is drawing me into through this healing process that are areas that I need to grow into. And so you have a safe place in that connection with other women who are experiencing the same thing that you might not get if you try to do this on your own or even just one-on-one. So there's a different kind of dynamic there.
There is. And it's a sense kind of like a battle buddy. We've used that term before, just knowing that we're in this together. And you're right, Jonathan, God has so much to do in our hearts through this, and at some point when we get in our healing that we're willing to focus more on that, that's when things get a little more hopeful and exciting because it's very draining to be focused on trying to do his journey for him or control him or cure him. Those things are never effective. So the group does encourage that, focusing on ourselves. And that's really what we're there together to do.
Mm-hmm. And I often think of it this way. It's kind of like when I travel quite a bit. And so then, when I'm on an airplane and they're doing the safety requirements and everything, and they talk about how if we lose cabin pressure, that these oxygen masks will fall from the ceiling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they often say, if you're going to help somebody else, you have to put your mask on first.
That's right.
And so many times wives have a natural instinct to want to try to help. And it might look a million different ways that they're trying to do that. They're trying to get their husband into counseling and trying to do all these things and trying to control certain aspects and whatever else. There's that natural instinct to help. But what she's done is she hasn't put her mask on first. And so she's just suffocating. And then at that point, that's not helpful for her, and it's not helpful for others either. So let's talk about how a wife can get plugged into these groups, because you've got some that are coming up here pretty soon. Yes. So why don't you share with wives how they can get plugged into one of these 3 groups that you've got going on?
Well, you can go on our website, BeBroken.com, under Help and Wives Care.
Mm-hmm.
And on our Wives Care page, we do have an opportunity there for you to register for those. And there are going to be 2 options most likely right now. So we would love for you to just take this bold step to invest in your own healing journey and see how God leads. Because I really believe, Jonathan, there's nothing that a wife can do that will help the situation most than to really take ownership of her own healing journey. Mm-hmm. With God's help, there's so much hope.
Yeah, so please reach out to us. You can, again, like Gigi said, go to BeBroken.com and go under the Wives Care section to sign up for those groups. Or you can call us toll-free at 1-800-497-8748. That's 1-800-49-PURITY, and get more information about those wives groups. We're glad you've been with us, and we look forward to having you back here next time on the Pure Sex Radio broadcast.
Pure Sex Radio is paid for by Be Broken Ministries. Visit us online at puresexradio.com.